What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another episode of the Kingdom Crew podcast. I am your host, Josh Fann of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com. And today I'm joined by my co-host, as always, the Michael D'Arcy of KC Sports Report and Bleacher Report. And Michael, it's been a couple weeks since we've done an episode, but it might as well have been a year with just about everything that has gone down. So the first portion of this episode, guys, is going to be catching up on the news. Some of it is more recent than others and more significant, but we'll start with this because this was the last thing that happened, or I should say the first thing that happened after the last time we talked. Cornerback L'Jarius Sneed was traded to the Tennessee Titans for a 2025 third-round pick as well as a 2024 seventh-round pick swap. Me and you had kind of already come to the conclusion prior to that L'Jarius Sneed would be traded at some point, and there was no way that he was playing on the franchise tag for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2024. But what are your feelings? And we don't have to spend too much time on this because it is kind of old news at this point, but what was your feelings, your reaction to the L'Jarius Sneed trade?
You know, I expected it. I know a lot of Chiefs fans thought that the Chiefs were going to get like a second or even a first-round draft pick as compensation for Sneed, but at the end of the day, what Chiefs fans didn't realize is that L'Jarius Sneed, being as good as he wasn't a Jalen Ramsey or a Darrelle Revis that commands a first-round pick. So I kind of expected it to be a day 2 pick, probably third round, and I'm okay with that. The only thing that I think is a little unfortunate is that it's a third-round pick for next year. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, the Chiefs could use that this year. So I think they probably could have gotten compensation for this year, but, they're stacking draft picks for the future. So I can't hate on it too much. And they did get him off of the salary cap, and they opened up the $19 million, I think it was, to sign other players. So for that reason, it was good, but they probably could have pushed a little bit harder to get something this year. But I'm not here saying that it's make or break that they got a 2025 first round or third rounder, but it would have been nicer to get somebody this year.
Yeah, it certainly would have been nicer to get an asset that actually helps you this year and helps you kind of like, you could use that asset to find that Sneed replacement in the draft potentially if you'd gotten a third rounder this year. It's also worth noting that the Titans didn't have a third rounder this year to actually trade, which is ultimately why he went for a 2025 third, not a 2024 third. It's because the Titans were really the only team. I think what ended up happening was there were other suitors for L'Jarius Sneed, but the big holdup was the contract. Sneed wanted to be paid like one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, which he deserves to ask for, right? He has the right to ask for that. But that doesn't mean every team was willing to do that. And not every team was willing to give up a big asset because they were only paying for negotiating rights for L'Jarius Sneed. You had to give him a new contract on top of it. So after we saw what Carlton Davis went for and what like Brian Burns went for, who obviously plays a different position, but plays a more valuable position, and he only got a second and a fifth, and he needed a new contract as well. Once you saw that, it's like, okay, I think we need to temper our expectations for a Sneed return. But in the end, the Chiefs free up that cap space, which has allowed them to make some other moves and some other smaller moves that were necessary before the draft. I think that's also maybe why the Chiefs were willing to let him go for that 2025 third, is because they got to a point where it's like, all right, we need this money. There's other guys we want to bring back. And we'll get to that in a little bit because there are some moves that the Chiefs have made, some other smaller moves. But we'll move on from that. And I want to talk to you about the Kansas City Chiefs signing Rees-Zammit, the rugby star from the NFL Player Pathway Program, which helps international athletes try to make the transition to American football. And the Chiefs went ahead after a workout and took a chance on Rees-Zammit, the rugby star. I made a short video on him talking about my thoughts. If I'm being quite honest, I don't even really expect him to make the roster. I'd be kind of surprised if he made the roster. But with the new kickoff rules that the NFL implemented, it gives him a better chance to make this team. And I think that, you look at him in those clips that you've probably seen on Twitter, he's very fast. He's built pretty well. Like, he definitely has the body of an NFL player. I question if he has that ability to stop on a dime and, make those cuts and just kind of the natural ability to run routes. Now, it's not like we're asking the guy to come in here and be Stephon Diggs running routes or anything like that. He's never played football before. That's an unfair ask, but the Chiefs definitely saw something here that they felt comfortable enough to bring him into camp and see what he gives you. I don't know, Michael. What are your expectations for LRZ? Are you thinking a little bit higher for him, or are you kind of in the same boat as me? Is like you'd be kind of surprised if he actually made the team? I'm curious.
It's interesting because if this was a 1-year flyer, then I could understand, thinking, okay, maybe he makes the team out of training camp, maybe he doesn't. We tried at the end of the day, but they did sign him to a 3-year deal. And
Well,
it's
so
probably, go
I'm
ahead.
going to stop you right there and point out. I saw that at first too, and I'm like, 3-year deal. Okay, so this is a pretty significant investment. But to my knowledge, this is no different than an undrafted free agent signing. So like take Malik Herring, for example, who was a UDFA but was on the team for multiple years. So it still doesn't guarantee that he'll be on the team. He could just end up being a practice squad guy that maybe gets a call up every once in a while. So I felt the need to clarify that, and then
Yeah.
he'll probably end up being what's that called? An ERFA. That's probably what he'll end up being after those 3 years if
Well, that's
he's still
kind of what
around.
I
But go ahead and continue with what you were going to say.
that's kind of what I was saying is I do think that, the 3 years, it doesn't really mean much. It's not like a normal, like an MVS signing where that 3 years doesn't, necessarily hold the same weight. But it's interesting because, like you said, the kickoff rules have changed. That would be very advantageous for the Chiefs to utilize a rugby player. But
Mm-hmm.
is he going to be the answer in the kickoff returning game? I don't know. And honestly, it's really hard to say because we haven't seen what he's like at training camp. We haven't seen what he's like with the pads on and what he's like in this offense. I think he's got a decent chance that he can really just excel at returning kicks. But outside of that, I mean, Chiefs fans think he's going to be like a Justin Ross type. Maybe he squeezes on the roster as a wide receiver. It's not going to happen like that. But if he does add something to this return game and to the special teams, I don't hate the addition at all. I really don't. I think he offers some upside. Like you said, he runs really, really fast. He's got a body that's built for the NFL. I know that a lot of people kind of got on him for his route running in the special little mini pro day or the combine that he held. I'm
Yeah,
not really putting
IMG
too much
Academy.
stock. I'm not really putting too much stock into that just because I think that the Chiefs can work on that. And that's assuming that he comes in and is a wide receiver. And, with his skill
Mm-hmm.
set being as moldable as it is, I don't think the wide receiver has to be the expectation. And he can come in and return kicks. And, that's best case scenario. But I don't really know what to think, but I definitely don't hate this. And it could turn into something very good for the Chiefs.
Yeah, it's not a very significant investment. It's one of those signings that you make, one of those moves that you make where there's not really any risk and you don't expect too much out of him. You're not leaning on him to make an impact or anything like that. But if he does, great. That it's a no risk move, and the Kansas City Chiefs are going to see what they can get out of him. He is listed as a running back on their website. I think I want to say that's what I saw. So that's probably where he'll be utilized the most, if at all. But definitely, I think you can expect to see him on kickoff with the new rule being implemented. We'll probably see him return some kicks in preseason, and then he'll probably be one of the biggest stories of training camp. But I think that pretty much wraps that up. The next bit of news I wanted to talk about, Carson Wentz, backup quarterback in Kansas City. He comes in on a 1-year deal to replace Blaine Gabbert, the Chiefs backup quarterback from last year. I was pretty happy with the signing, honestly, Michael. For a backup quarterback, I mean, Carson Wentz is a little bit different than what the Chiefs have kind of targeted at that position in years past. Kind of what I said about the signing is like Blaine Gabbert, Chad Henne, Matt Moore, those guys were more so coaches that were also backup quarterbacks. They were kind of here to be a mentor to Patrick Mahomes, but you were nervous if they ever had to come in for a game. And of course, there were a couple times credit to like Chad Henne because he definitely came in at some crucial times and actually held it down. But you were still kind of like, all right, what's going to happen here? And then like Blaine Gabbert, I know he played in that week. Was it the last game of the season against the Chargers, and he threw like an awful interception. You're like, hopefully we don't have to see Blaine Gabbert in the postseason or anything. Carson Wentz, on the other hand, he has that pedigree of being a starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. Former first-round draft pick, helped lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl. I know it was Nick Foles that was at quarterback, but Carson Wentz was playing like an MVP candidate that year, and he's thrown for over 3,000 yards several times. He even threw for over 4,000 yards one season. Has spent time with the Colts, Commanders, and then most recently the Los Angeles Rams. This is a guy that I feel like if Patrick Mahomes were to go down at some point next year and he were to miss like 3 or 4 games, you're not going to fall down the standings with Carson Wentz at quarterback. Carson Wentz can play a little bit. He's a spot starter, a backup quarterback, but he's a backup quarterback that provides a much higher ceiling, in my opinion, than a Blaine Gabbert or a Chad Henne, because he can go off script a little bit and make some of those plays with his arm. Whereas those other guys were going to come in and they're going to run the bare bones, most vanilla Andy Reid offense possible, very scripted. Carson Wentz, he can play a little bit. He's nothing spectacular, but guy that I'm definitely comfortable with if Mahomes got hurt and had to miss a few games. What do you think?
You know, it's interesting because I definitely think that Carson Wentz raises the floor of the, Chiefs backup quarterback room. I think he's definitely better than a Shane Bichelle or, even, Blaine Gabbert and Chad Henne in the past. But I think my biggest concern is that, yeah, he is more athletic and he is more skilled, but the risk factor is still there. He was a guy where he threw a lot of interceptions in Indianapolis and even in Washington. And, some teams try to make him their permanent starter and it didn't work out very well. And so, yeah, he's not going to be that in Kansas City, but it almost makes me wonder, okay, if he does have to come in the game and save the game, is he going to be able to do that? Just because, he is prone to throw more interceptions, because I think that he thinks that he can do a lot more than he actually can. And so for that reason, I get a little bit concerned, but I do think that the talent level is much more than we've had in years prior. But necessarily, when I'm looking at it, you almost want somebody to kind of come in and just do the bare minimum and just get by. And I'm almost worried that Carson Wentz would try to seize this role of, if Patrick Mahomes does go down and try to do too much and throw a lot of interceptions and cost this team. Granted, it's Andy Reid. It's his offense. He's going to, make the right calls with Carson Wentz if he does become the quarterback, God forbid. But I do have that worry in the back of my head.
So I understand the concern. However, I think because of the fact that he signed this deal with the Chiefs, that would kind of indicate that it's the opposite, because he knows he's not starting over Patrick Mahomes. He knows coming in, he has zero chance of ever being the starting quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, barring an injury, of course. Whereas in those other places that you did mention, like Indianapolis and Washington, he was kind of under the notion, hey, I could kind of still win this starting job and maybe stick around here for a while. He's not doing that in Kansas City. He has accepted that role. He's embraced that role of being the backup quarterback. And so when he comes into a game, if he has to, he's not going to be trying to wow other NFL teams or anything like that. He knows that he's here to back up Patrick Mahomes. And I think he's kind of gotten to that point in his career where he understands this is where he's at and this is how he's going to continue playing in the NFL, is if he accepts a backup role. So understand the concern, but I think because this is the Kansas City Chiefs and because this is Patrick Mahomes, Carson Wentz is starting to come to that realization that this is his gig in the NFL. This is his role, and this is where he belongs, is in a backup role.
Yeah, and if he's a backup, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I think he offers more talent. I think my only concern is if he ever does get thrusted into a game, that he might try to, put a little something on it so some other people around the league can see him play. And, maybe he throws a few more interceptions or, throws more turnover-worthy balls. And that could be a bit concerning. But overall, it's a really good signing. And he's your best backup quarterback that you've had with Patrick Mahomes. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, as long as he's not killing you with turnovers, I don't mind if he has a few of them, because like the other reason I like the Carson Wentz signing at backup quarterback is because with him, even if Mahomes goes down, you can still open up your offense a little bit with Carson Wentz. Like, he has that arm talent. We've seen him play before. He's the most athletic backup they've ever had at quarterback. So you can, I want Andy Reid, if Mahomes were to go down, to open up the offense a little bit with Carson Wentz, because he's good enough to do that. So as long as the turnovers aren't absolutely killing you, I'm fine with it. But we're talking about a lot of hypotheticals that probably aren't going to happen. This is the backup quarterback. You hope he never sees the field and we don't have to talk about his play. But as far as a backup quarterback goes, I think this was a pretty good signing.
Agreed.
All right. And then after that, the Kansas City Chiefs opted to bring back running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire on a 1-year deal. And I should throw in with that tidbit that there was reports that day that free agent running back J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens was visiting Kansas City. I would have loved J.K. Dobbins. I was actually talking about him on Twitter as a guy that I liked. That would kind of move the needle a little bit for me just because I know he struggled with injuries, but averages 5.8 yards per carry for his career, has found the end zone 13 times in 24 career games, adds some juice. He's got some speed, good athleticism, can run some outside zone, which the Chiefs like to do, but Pacheco isn't great at and CEH can't do. I kind of hope that they circle back around to J.K. Dobbins at some point, but I fear that they kind of used him as negotiating for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or to kind of see where his market was at. And J.K. Dobbins maybe asked for too much money, and they were like, that's okay. We got CEH. We'll fall back on him. I'm hoping that the CEH signing is no more than insurance that if they can't draft a running back they like, he's RB3 or whatever. But if he's your backup running back, that is underwhelming to me. CEH, we've seen what he's done as a top 2 running back in the rotation. It's just not very good. And I know towards the end of last season, we gave him his flowers because he made the most of his touches down the stretch. But even then, Michael, when you remember, like I remember like the Patriots game last season, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had that like moss in the back of the end zone against the Patriots, right? And it's like, oh wow, CEH, like he's actually making plays. And he would have a couple plays like that each game, but then he would still have like those 2 or 3 handoffs that go for like negative yards. And you're like, okay, CEH just ran out of magic for the day. If CEH is getting more than 4 or 5 touches in a game, something went completely wrong this offseason.
Yeah, I don't hate the signing, but I was under the impression that you roll with Pacheco and you draft somebody fairly high. Maybe not high, but maybe not in the 7th round.
Early day 3.
Yeah. And, I just don't know if they're going to do that. I hope they do, because I think that you could find somebody in the draft that is much better and fits the offense better than Clyde. But, I mean, Josh, how many times have the Chiefs, and we're going to talk about it later on in the video, how many times have the Chiefs brought back somebody that they're comfortable with just because they've won here before? It's a pretty substantial amount of players. And so that's kind of what this signing feels like to me. It's a guy that they know what they're going to get. They're comfortable with him. He's a team guy. That's why they brought him back. And I would like it if they drafted somebody pretty, high on day 3. Clyde came into camp, didn't end up getting the job, and they cut him. And that's the end of Clyde. But at the end of the day, I think it's probably not going to happen. And hopefully they draft a running back, so at least we have some other option. But it might be a Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire as his backup in 2024.
And see, I hate that. And I fear that you may be right, and that's what they end up doing. But I just would hate that. And when I saw this signing, it kind of felt like to me that Brett Veach was trying to squeeze as much juice as he possibly can out of that draft pick because it looks better on him if they can. And I just would rather have had J.K. Dobbins. I know he struggles to stay healthy, but if he's healthy, he just provides such a higher ceiling than CEH, where CEH, last year in his improved year that a lot of people call it, he averaged like 3.2 yards per carry. That's not efficient at all. And if he's getting those RB2 carries, those RB2 touches, I think something went wrong, or the front office just made the wrong decision. And I agree 100% about what you said. And I kind of summarized this on Twitter as well. The Kansas City Chiefs will often opt with familiarity over the better player. Or like they'll opt for that more familiar option, even if it means going with the worst player. CEH, objectively, when both are on the field and healthy, is a worse player than J.K. Dobbins, but he provides the familiarity. He's a good locker room presence, which anytime you hear that, when that's the first thing that anyone says about a player is their locker room presence when they re-sign, you know that the guy probably isn't the greatest football player in the world. And I get it, man. Like sometimes you need to have those locker room guys that know that they're going to be 3rd or 4th in the rotation or on the depth chart, but they're not going to complain about it, and they know why they're here. To me, CEH is a break glass in case of emergency running back. If someone gets hurt, he enters your top 2, but there should still be 2 or maybe even 3 running backs ahead of him. So for that to be the case, the Chiefs would not only have to draft one, they'd also have to bring in another veteran at some point. So I'm wondering if and when that's going to happen, because if it doesn't, I think we know what kind of role we can expect for CEH in 2024.
See, I don't even hate them signing him over JK because I'm not a really big Dobbins guy. I just think he's not going to play more than 3 games. So it's like, all right, why bring him in? But
Sure.
if you're just going to, give up, I would have rather them not sign Clyde and just go into the draft and get one. Like I think that's my biggest complaint because while Dobbins would probably move the needle up, I think the over under on how many games he ends up playing is not very high. I bet it's probably 3 or 4. I just don't think he can stay healthy. And so I don't hate them missing out
That's
on
fair.
Dobbins, but you definitely could get somebody better than Clyde in the draft. And if they do that, great. But you cannot roll into this season with Clyde being your running back too, when the only move that you made to this offense was cutting MVS and bringing in Hollywood Brown. That's just not acceptable. Clyde does not make this team better at all, and they need players that are going to make this team better. And so I hope that they do that in the draft. But if they don't, we're going to have some complaints come training camp.
Well, and that's kind of my issue to this point. We knew the Chiefs weren't going to have a super splashy all season. They weren't going to spend a ton of money. We knew that they were going to grab a veteran receiver, but at the same time, I kind of hate the running it back thing where we're running it back at defensive tackle. We're running it back at running back. We're probably going to run it back mostly everywhere. And then we're going to use the draft to kind of supplement. And the problem with that is when you do that, you kind of miss out on that opportunity to bring in new blood to try and improve this team. Because like Matt Lane said it best for KCSN, run it back in itself was not a bad philosophy, because if you look at that 2020 season after they won the Super Bowl, that team run it back was not the problem that year, because what ended up happening was that the whole offensive line got hurt. That was why that season failed. But you look at 2021, that's when run it back really hurt them, because since they brought back just about everyone, that made them feel like they were comfortable everywhere, and that the draft was more of a luxury, which that's why they made draft picks like CEH at running back. They're like, hell, why not? We're set everywhere. And then come 2021, you remember how many holes were on that team, Michael. They did not do enough that offseason. And I thought they got too comfortable, and I'm hoping that the Chiefs don't get too comfortable. And just because they won the Super Bowl in spite of these position groups, such as like running back and defensive tackle, because let's face it, running back, I mean, Pacheco's nice, but behind him, there's not much. And then you look at defensive tackle, outside of Chris Jones, that was the worst defensive tackle rotation in the league. And it's like, yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs won in spite of those players, but that shouldn't stop you from trying to improve there. And it feels like there have been a lot of veterans in free agency at running back and at defensive tackle that could have helped this team, that the Chiefs just said, hey, you know what? That's fine. We got Mike Pinnell. We got Derek Nottie. And it's like, that doesn't really move the needle that much. And I kind of wish they did a little bit more, because so far they haven't done more. And when you look at the veteran running back market, there's not really anyone left. J.K. Dobbins was like the last guy that kind of would have moved the needle for me at all. And it looks like maybe that's not happening anymore, because it kind of reminds me of like Melvin Ingram a few years ago, where he visited as a free agent. And then we heard, hey, the visit went well. We'll see what happens. And then nothing ever really happened. And of course, they traded for Melvin Ingram later on at the trade deadline. But this to me kind of sounds like that, where it's like J.K. Dobbins came in. His number was too high for the Kansas City Chiefs. And they're like, it's fine. We got Clyde. Kind of like with Melvin Ingram, the Chiefs were like, it's fine. We have Alex Okafor, Michael. We have Mike Danna. Speaking of Mike Danna, perfect transition. The Chiefs have brought back Mike Danna on a 3-year, $24 million deal. That's kind of where the L'Jarius Sneed cap space has really went into use at this point, was to bring back Mike Danna. That was one of the first names we heard about after they traded L'Jarius Sneed and opened up that cap space. I like Danna, Michael. I do. I want to preface anything I'm about to say with, I like Mike Danna as a football player. I think he's a good defensive end to have in your rotation. You look at his production from last year, pretty decent. Before I say anything else, I just want to get your take. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs bringing back Mike Danna on that multi-year deal? And then if you have anything to add to what I said before that, go ahead and do that first. But because I don't want to move on before you're ready to move on. But go ahead.
No, I think we're ready to move on. Dana's interesting because I think that he's been a solid player for the Chiefs, I don't necessarily know if they overpaid for him. I was kind of surprised to see a multi-year deal for Danna. That did surprise me,
This late in the
especially.
game. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was very odd, but you know, he's another guy the Chiefs are comfortable with, another guy that Spags loves, and so it made sense to bring him back. 3 years, 24 million. How much is guaranteed? I think it's like 18, isn't it?
13. 13.
13. Okay, okay. 13. That's still a
If you
pretty
look
decent
at it,
chunk of change.
if you look at it from the guaranteed money perspective, it's not too far off from like what Charles Omenihu got. Less years, of course, on Charles Omenihu's deal. When I saw this though, my first thought was like, okay, who were you bidding against though? Like, don't get me wrong, like Danna, the contract isn't terrible, but like, who were you bidding against this late in free agency that you felt like you needed to give Danna 3 years, $20+ million? That just didn't make any sense to me. I have zero problems with Mike Danna. He's fine as a defensive end 3 or 4. But usually when you're still available this close to the draft, you're only getting a 1-year deal, a cheap 1-year deal. And I saw Nate Taylor of The Athletic put out a report saying that multiple teams were interested in him. And it's like, I don't know, man, that kind of feels like a spin to me because any of those teams could have had him for the last month plus, and he was sitting there on the market. So this to me feels like the Kansas City Chiefs just wanting to take care of one of their own players.
And listen, Danna definitely deserves it. He's been here the last couple seasons
Yeah.
and been pretty important to this team.
Again,
What they've done.
zero issues with Danna. Zero. I don't want to make it seem like I have a problem with Mike Danna. Just a little bit confused as to who they were bidding against here. That's all.
They were bidding against themselves, Josh. They wanted it to seem like there was more interest in Danna than there actually was. Because listen, if there was this bidding war, he would have gone before they traded L'Jarius Sneed, and so that didn't make sense at all. But again, the problems now with Danna, really, I don't have a problem with the contract either. Maybe you could have done better next offseason if you'd have just signed him to a 1-year deal. But I think that they're also banking on Felix taking more of a jump in year 2, which hopefully he does. But don't hate the contract. I think they paid somebody that deserved to get paid. And the contract's not going to break the bank. But, you know, I think it's a great supplementary move, but they need more. You know what I mean? They need to add more, whether that's in the draft or in free agency next year. He cannot be your defensive end 2 for the next 3 seasons. He just can't be.
And that's a perfect point that I was going to make if you didn't, is that Mike Danna is a good defensive end 3 or 4. And with his return, the Kansas City Chiefs now return the same exact defensive line group from last season, I should say. That's fine. That's great. But we just mentioned how running it back everywhere can be a little bit harmful if you're not also trying to improve on top of what you already had. So far, like, bringing back Mike Danna does not make the Chiefs better.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Danna's not a good player, but it doesn't make them better because he was on the team last year. You know, it doesn't make you better. So what else are you going to do on top of Mike Danna to make sure that we're keeping the thing going and that we're adding more talent so that next year we're not having to also replace Mike Danna? Well, of course, it's a 3-year deal, but like I should say like Charles Omenihu or like Felix Anudike-Uzomah, if he ends up not panning out, all of a sudden you're going to have to take 2 or 3 more defensive ends next year. And that's when we get into this hole that we were in for so long where defensive end was like number 1 on our needs list for 3 straight years, if you remember that. So I would still, I wouldn't let this preclude the Chiefs from trying to add even another veteran, someone like Emmanuel Ogbah, who's still out there, especially since Charles Omenihu is probably going to miss the first 6 to 8 games of next year. And yeah, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, hopefully he takes a step and can fill in more of those snaps. But there's also the possibility that he doesn't, because right now, Felix Anudike-Uzomah is kind of in the Sky Moore category where we're kind of worried about you. We're not saying you're a bust, but we're kind of worried about you because you didn't really do much last year, which is, you know, it's fine. The Chiefs, the defensive line was second in the league in sacks. They didn't necessarily need FAU. So it's fine if he takes a redshirt year. But so far, people are a little bit worried about him. He's just in that Sky Moore category of we don't know what you are. Do we need to bring in someone else? If I were the Chiefs, I would still bring in someone else. That's kind of the point that I'm making, because the issue with Danna arises when you ask him to play starter snaps. He's a defensive end 3 or 4 at best, but right now you look at the depth chart, no Charles Omenihu. FAU is unproven. Mike Danna is defensive end 2. Mike Danna does not win enough of his one-on-ones. His pass rush rate or his pass rush win rate is not good enough to be a defensive end number 2. So I would still maybe look at some defensive end prospects in the draft. Someone like a Darius Robinson from Missouri, who's been mocked to the Chiefs quite a bit, or has been talked about, because he can play inside, outside. He definitely seems like a Spags guy, but that's adding talent to the room. So again, I will say I like Mike Danna, but I would definitely not let this stop the Chiefs from trying to add more and trying to keep this thing going.
I also think the biggest thing that the Chiefs are banking on right now is that they have another draft class they did a couple of years ago. And that really kind of kept the window open. And if Veach can do that again, then the Chiefs will be fine. And maybe that's what he's banking on. But that's a really big gamble because players don't hit. And you mentioned Felix maybe being in the Sky Moore category. Man, I hope not, because I've already written Sky Moore off. I'm not really the biggest Sky Moore guy. And I don't really know what he offers to this team for the future.
I just mean like Sky Moore heading into last year. It's like,
okay,
we know he didn't do much as a rookie, but it's like, okay, can you take a step forward, or like, what are you going to do for us? And now he's a disappointment. Felix and Udike-Uzomah heading into next season is kind of like Sky Moore for me heading into last season. It's like, okay, you didn't do much as a rookie. That's fine. We didn't need you to, just like we didn't need Sky Moore last year because you had Juju, MVS, Kelsey was still kicking it. We didn't need FAU last year, but now we kind of need you this year, man. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And hopefully with, Omenahu being out for a while, it's going to give Felix more of an opportunity to play some meaningful snaps, because for as much as we complain that we didn't see much from Felix last year, he didn't really play a whole lot. So I would like to see him play more snaps because, he had that play in the Super Bowl. And, if that's a sign of things to come, then I think the Chiefs have somebody. But we need to see him play more meaningful snaps, and hopefully that's what he gets this year. But, I definitely think, to kind of bring it back, Danna is a really good third defensive end to have, and I don't hate that for the price in which they got him. But you cannot rely on him to be your starter for a full 17-game season and expect to win. So hopefully they can maybe draft somebody else, or Felix takes a step. But outside of that, I like the Danna contract a lot.
Yeah, don't hate Danna the player at all. I just don't want the Chiefs thrusting him into a role that he doesn't fit, because that's been our biggest complaint at times about this front office and the way they handle things, is they try to fit square pegs in a round hole, try to put guys in roles that they don't thrive in. Danna thrives as a depth defensive end. Once he starts to play starter snaps, kind of like he did in 2021, it's like, all right, Danna isn't getting enough pressure on his own to be able to do that. And I think that's another reason that Danna's market wasn't very hot, is a lot of GMs saw through his numbers. He had 6.5 sacks, which is pretty good. You would think that would earn you a decent multi-year deal, but he played next to Chris Jones, the best defensive tackle in all of football. And I think a lot of GMs saw through that, and they're like, this is a guy that doesn't win a ton of his one-on-ones. He's exclusively a cleanup sack guy. Like, I posted that chart on Twitter after the Chiefs re-signed him of the pass rush win rate and double team rate. Danna's double teamed quite a bit. That's mostly from him playing those interior snaps, though, because when you're playing on the interior, you're just going to get double teamed more, definitely more than if you were playing defensive end. But Danna was like the very bottom in pass rush win rate. He is exclusively a cleanup sack guy, which is fine. He sets the edge a little bit. He's an energy guy, good locker room guy. I know I use that as kind of an insult to CEH earlier, but it's definitely, Danna at least contributes on the field more than CEH does. But like, I don't know if you saw that video from the franchise where they handed Mike Danna a tablet, and it was basically all of his teammates being asked, hey, who's the hardest working guy on the team? Who's the most underrated guy on the team? All of them said Mike Danna. And I think that shows how important Mike Danna is to the team culture. And you definitely want to maintain that team's culture in the midst of trying to go for a three-peat. So I will say it one more time. I'll put a bow on it. 0 issues with Mike Danna at all. But the Kansas City Chiefs should not be done adding to this position.
Absolutely.
So with all that being said, let's move on to the juicy topics in Chiefs Kingdom right now, for better or worse. The Rashee Rice situation, the latest on everything. So I know the last time I made a video is basically just talking about what's going on, just kind of the initial breaking news. Hey, Dallas police are looking for Rashee Rice. Knew zero about his involvement, knew zero about whether he was driving any of the cars. We didn't even know if he was or there at the scene or anything. But then photos started to come out, and it's like, hey, that guy kind of looks like Rashee Rice, but some fans were still holding out a little bit of hope. maybe it's not him. And then Rashee Rice, retains counsel, hires a lawyer. His lawyer confirms that he was involved. Still don't know how much he was involved. We don't know for sure if he was the driver. And then Rashee Rice posted on his Instagram story saying, I take responsibility for my involvement in this. We don't know how much he was involved, but I think it's pretty much confirmed at this point that he was there at the scene. He fled the scene, and he caused a major accident. There is a lot to unpack here, a lot to talk about. I figure this will take us a while, but Michael, I mean, man, I saw you made a video on it, but what were your feelings when you woke up on Easter morning and saw it? Well, actually, no, I remember you. I was talking to you on Twitter whenever it happened in the middle of the night. So you kind of saw it then. You didn't even have to wake up on Easter morning to see what happened. But what were your thoughts? And what are your thoughts now? Like, where are you with Rashee Rice and kind of his outlook for playing next season? I think at this point, most of us kind of expect him to still be on the team, to still play for the Kansas City Chiefs, assuming that nothing horrible comes out of this. But he'll probably be suspended, I think, is where most people are at. So where are you at with Rashee Rice?
Josh, I have absolutely no idea what is going on because I made a video kind of talking about what I thought the timeline of this situation was. I was so wrong. I thought that he wasn't driving the car. I said that he wasn't driving the car because dash cam footage showed that he kind of got out of the car really quickly and he came out on the other side. And so I was like, okay, he wasn't driving the car. And I did say that, his Corvette was at the scene because we knew that at the time. But then it comes out that, he was involved, but he wasn't. He was or was not driving the car. I thought he wasn't. And then I was told that he was. And then you just said that he wasn't. So I have no idea from that aspect.
I think if I had to guess, and this is just me speculating, guessing, is he did drive one of the cars. It hasn't been confirmed that he was driving. We just know that he was involved. The only thing that has been confirmed and actually admitted to is that he was involved and he was in one of the cars. But him getting out of the passenger side doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't driving. He could have simply gotten out on that side to make himself look better. He could have had to get out on that side because the door was jammed from the damage to the vehicle. So there's a ton of different scenarios that could have played out here. Not a good look at all, though. I'll tell you what, man. The thing that gets to me the most is the fact that he fled the scene. It's like, why'd you flee the scene? That makes it look so much worse. And whatever suspension that he gets from the NFL, because he'll likely get one if I had to guess at this point, whatever suspension he gets is probably going to be about 2 games more than it would have been if he just stayed there and took responsibility. Him fleeing the scene made it look so much worse. And then we got news a couple days ago that there was marijuana in the car. Not a huge shock. It's popular for athletes to use, and people are becoming more and more relaxed on it. But that said, it's like, if you're going to flee the scene, at least take the evidence with you. Yeah. How do you screw up that bad?
How can you be that bad? Like so reckless and so irresponsible in so many ways. If you're going to do this, don't do this, first of all. But if you're going to do it, why leave something at the scene that's just going to get you in more trouble than it's worth? That didn't make sense to me. But yeah, no, it's just a really weird situation. And we were trying to put the pieces together the day before Easter, late into the evening. And I still feel like we really haven't put the pieces together on what happened. And I think that the lawyer came out to make that statement to kind of, I guess, shield Rashee from some of the blame, but also to take some responsibility for what happened. But again, we don't really know what happened. And I almost wonder if we're ever going to really figure out what happened. I'm sure Rashee's going to get asked about it, but he'll probably just direct it back to his lawyer. So I don't know if we're going to find out. Somebody's got to get held responsible, legally speaking, for what happened. And so maybe that's where we'll find our answer. But Josh, I mean, it's been what? It's been a week later, and we have very little idea of what happened on that night. Just that a car that he owned and a car that he rented were at the scene. And we don't know if he was driving. I reported that he wasn't driving, but he very well could have been driving. So who knows what's going on?
I just looked up Rashee Rice, and The Athletic put out a piece saying that his lawyer did say at a press conference that he was driving a Lamborghini, which still doesn't necessarily mean he was driving. He's just admitting to it. It could have been one of his friends, and he's just taking the fall for him, something like that. But it looks like he's going to go through the legal process, taking responsibility for driving the car. It's just an incredibly stupid decision. And I
Well,
get it, man. He's
I just
young.
got I just got breaking news about this very same thing.
Okay.
Apparently, that after the hit and run incident, a Dallas couple has retained a lawyer. The woman who received stitches in her eyelid is on bed rest and contemplating further legal action, according to the Dallas News.
Okay.
So, some interesting developments there. I'm sure she's going to get compensated very well for,
Oh,
the
yeah.
injuries that she sustained. And listen, I know that the lawyer said something along the lines of you can't really judge Rashee by this one action, or at least don't judge a guy by one mistake that he made in his early 20s. Now, I will say I'm in my early 20s, and I know Josh, you are as well. I
Mhm.
don't think that we would do that. Not all people that are young make reckless and irresponsible decisions, but he is an athlete with millions of dollars. So I can kind of see him, doing something that is, exhilarating and gives him some excitement. But I definitely don't think that this makes Rashee Rice a villain forever. But listen, he made a really stupid mistake and he should be punished for it if it does call for it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I get it. Guys make mistakes, but Michael, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think many people our age just accidentally cause a 6-car pileup on the highway.
No.
That is something that, like, look, Rashee's an idiot for that. I mean, straight up, and hopefully he has someone in his life that's telling him that, dude, you're an idiot. You almost caused someone to lose their life. Rashee Rice was one fucking, I don't know. He I don't know how to say it. It's like he was very close to becoming the next Henry Ruggs and like causing someone to die from his reckless driving. And he should be very lucky. He should probably lose his license for a little bit. And the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have to take precautions to make sure that people are keeping an eye on Rashee Rice so that something like this doesn't happen. And I find it interesting too that a lot of clips of audio and a lot of articles have resurfaced talking about how Rashee Rice had these character concerns prior to the NFL draft and how a lot of people didn't like the people that he surrounded himself with at SMU. And I think you're starting to see that come to light now. This is what they were talking about. And this is something that I think this organization really needs to consider more in the future, because how many times does this have to happen? Not only in the NFL, because like I saw earlier today that the Texas defensive tackle, Tavondre Sweat, who's a big time prospect in this upcoming draft, was arrested on a DWI during one of his visits with a team. Then you have what happened with Henry Ruggs. You have this organization, what happened with Britt Reed, Andy Reid's son. How many times do we have to take a guy into this organization with character concerns before it bites you in the ass so many times that you decide, hey, maybe we kind of start to look at those character concerns a little bit more? Because every offseason, Michael, it is something with this organization. Frank Clark, Tyreek Hill, Rashee Rice, and like
Willie Gay.
Yeah, it's always something going on. And I don't know, like I understand that Andy Reid is a man of second chances. So is Brett Veach, it appears. But if you're Clark Hunt and you're Mark Donovan, those guys upstairs, at some point you have to be going like, hey, we're tired of dealing with this. We're tired of having to cover our asses in the PR department because our players are being stupid off the field. There's just so many elements to this that I could go on and on about, but Rashee Rice is truly lucky that nobody died in this incident and that nobody was seriously hurt. Because if they were, we're talking about his future in the NFL and on the Kansas City Chiefs being in doubt. Whereas right now, he'll probably face some harsh consequences. He'll have to owe a lot of money. That's the other thing too, is like he's only on a rookie deal. He's going to have a lot of legal fees to pay. He's going to have to pay for that Lamborghini that he was renting and destroyed. Like, man, and here's the other thing too. Assuming he makes it through all this and nothing else comes out of it, he is probably going to have to take less money with the Kansas City Chiefs on his next deal. So not only did he lose money in the short term because he has to pay all these fees, he probably lost money in the long term, Michael, because I feel like this could be kind of like a Tyreek Hill scenario where the Chiefs kind of got a discount on his last deal because of everything that was going on behind the scenes. I feel like this is something that in a few years, when it's time to come to the negotiating table for Rashee Rice, the Chiefs are saying, hey, we'd love to make you one of the highest paid players at your position for your performance, but unfortunately, because of your off the field stuff, we have to put some clauses in here, and we have to kind of take some money off the table because we're not too sure we trust you with this money.
Yeah, and you talk about maybe, or the possibility that he could have been the next Henry Ruggs, and man, I mean, he's one life lost. All it takes is one, and he did something incredibly irresponsible. And listen, I'm not gonna say for certain if he was under the influence, but he did flee the scene, and there was drugs in his car. So, I mean, that again, Henry Ruggs was under the influence of alcohol when he killed a woman. Rashee Rice was very, very close to committing the same mistake, whether or not he was under the influence or not. He almost killed somebody. I mean, this is major stuff. And so hopefully he has somebody in his life telling him that he just got a second chance. He just got the chance to turn his life around, maybe, clean up some of the people that he's hanging around with, and maybe, fix some of the issues that apparently have been there, whether they have been or not, fix the issues going forward and be a better dude. And guess what? I mean, he should be very grateful for that, and hopefully he can. But Josh, like you said, every single offseason, it seems like somebody gets in trouble for something. And, I don't want to say it's great for us because it gives us something to talk about, but they always give us something to talk about. And you wish you didn't have to talk about it, but they just keep doing something that puts the team in a negative light. And so hopefully this was Rashee Rice's wake-up call. And listen, I mean, this isn't a 3 strikes you're out thing. This is a 2 strikes and you're out thing. And he almost did something that, I mean, isn't just going to ruin your NFL career. It's going to ruin your life. He could be in prison right now if he just, if one thing went wrong. And listen, something went wrong, but he got very lucky. He got really lucky.
And just looking back on it, it's like, Rashee Rice, you were so stupid because, like, okay, if you're street racing and it's 2 a.m. and there's nobody on the road, it's still not advisable. Still wouldn't do it. I still think it's pretty stupid, but it's like, I get it to an extent. He did this at 6:30 in the evening in broad daylight on a busy highway on a Saturday night. Why? And then fleeing the scene on top of it just makes him look so much worse. If he would stay, took responsibility, made sure the victims were okay, because there were some minor injuries in this, it's just really bad luck. Also, there was a clip of them walking off, and someone was like, "Oh, they probably stole him." And I know that guy that said that in that clip got a bunch of backlash because people thought that maybe he was making some judgment based on their race. But like, I kind of like don't fault the dude because there was a Lamborghini and a Corvette involved. If you owned either of those vehicles, even if the accident was your fault, wouldn't you want to stay behind and swap insurance details on those vehicles? Because they walked off, that's why the guy thought that they were stolen. Because if you had a car that expensive, the only reason you would run away from the scene is because it was stolen. That's the first thought a lot of people have. So I don't know. That was something that bothered me because I saw a lot of people on social media absolutely eviscerating that guy for saying that. And it's like, well, when you leave 2 6-figure cars at the scene, yeah, people are going to think that they're stolen.
It's also, I mean, the more that I think about it, you gotta have, listen, I mean, this is not confirmed, but you gotta think the drugs are involved. The drugs were in the car. Like, you have to think, like, you'd be naive to think that they didn't play any factor or it couldn't be a factor. I'm just pointing out that, listen, the guy that did this left right after it happened. Clearly, there's something involved. Whether, I mean, he left it in his car too. I mean, again, it's very careless. It was irresponsible. And he's lucky that he himself didn't die. But
yeah,
Josh, I mean,
get seriously injured.
It feels like we are still a week later left in the complete dark with what actually happened. And that is normally not a good thing. So hopefully Rashee Rice's lawyer getting out ahead of this and releasing the statement, kind of, mentioning his involvement, but not really fully mentioning what he was, at fault for doing, was a good thing to kind of get out in front of it. But again, we're still left with so many questions. And I think that the reason that they did that was to cover their own ass and to make sure that if they do get suspended, it's by the Chiefs and maybe not the NFL, or the punishment is lighter. So I definitely think that for that reason it was good. But
because
yeah.
But we know that Kareem Hunt, with what he did, which kind of seems like very small compared to this. I mean, y'all could debate. I don't know. This to me, it seems like a much bigger deal because these are lives at risk. Okay. With him, the problem wasn't what he did. It was the fact that he lied about it. And I think that there were people in Rashee Rice's ear, whether it was Brett Veach, whether it was some of Rashee Rice's teammates, saying, look, just tell the truth. If you had any involvement, it'll make yourself look better in the long run. Don't slow play this thing and try to fight it. Like, just come out, admit your involvement in this. And assuming that you didn't kill anybody, which it looks like you didn't, everything will be fine. You learn the lesson, you move on. What he did was incredibly stupid, but hopefully this is something that we'll move on from, and Rashee Rice will look back at this as a teaching moment. Hey, maybe I shouldn't be street racing at 6:30 p.m. on a busy highway. Maybe I should find some better friends too.
Yeah. There's a lot to the situation too, and
we'll talk about it.
It's unfortunate,
as more details come out.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back down with a lighter topic. Still not great, but definitely a lighter topic. So, Michael, if you weren't aware, there was a vote held in Jackson County last week, where Jackson County residents had the opportunity to vote yes or no on a 3/8 sales tax extension that would fund a new Royals downtown baseball stadium and a new Kansas City Chiefs stadium upgrades. The Jackson County residents voted a resounding no to the 3/8 of a sales tax, or 3/8 of a cent sales tax. This now opens the door to one or the other, or even both, of the Kansas City Chiefs and Kansas City Royals leaving Kansas City, whether that's to go to the Kansas side of Kansas City, whether that's to leave Kansas City completely. This is the very early stages of what could potentially happen. But what was your reaction to the Jackson County residents voting no to the Arrowhead Stadium improvements and to the Royals downtown ballpark? And what do you think is going to happen? Like, are you rooting for the Chiefs to come to the Kansas side? Is that what you want, or would you rather them stay in Arrowhead?
So it's interesting because at the very beginning, I was like, man, I was disappointed because I thought that they made the wrong decision. And while I still don't think they made the right decision, I can understand maybe voting more from a perspective of the Royals kind of messed around and didn't really give any final details of
their
where
pitch was awful.
Yeah, or like, where is this shit gonna go? Like they didn't really give a good answer. And so for all the Jackson County residents, we're probably like, we're not gonna vote for this tax.
Their pitch
haven't given us
Clark Hunt and John Sherman's pitch was basically like, hey, give us your money. We promise we'll do good things with it.
Yeah, which for that reason, I understand voting no. But I will say, Jackson County, if you want to keep the Royals and the Chiefs, maybe you have to bite the bullet and just say, you know what? Here you go. Again, this tax already exists. It would have just gone towards the Chiefs and the Royals. And I think there's a much better chance that, the Chiefs don't do anything, because it was really dependent on if the Royals got, the votes necessary to move downtown. And Josh, I don't know if you saw this, but John Sherman's wife said some very harsh things that they're never going to play in, Jackson County. And the thing that I don't like is the Royals are trying to capitalize on the Chiefs' success to go downtown. I don't like the whole KC Tenants thing of, oh, you're going to get rid of the 20 businesses downtown. Guess what? The Kansas City Royals would make way more money for the city and for probably the Jackson County as a whole than whatever those businesses are going to give you. And also, think about it. If the Royals do move downtown, all of those businesses, they're going to get displaced. They're going to get a fat check for, relocation and whatever they want to move out of that area so they can build the stadium. So let's not act like they're not going to get compensated. But I don't like how the Royals didn't give any solid answer about where they're going to move. And I think that's what, in the end, ended up hurting them. I'm not somebody, even though I do live in Kansas, that is pounding the table for them to move to Legends. I'm not a huge fan of Legends. That might shock some people, but I don't mind the Chiefs staying in Missouri. And I don't care if the Royals move downtown. The thing that really bothers me is the threat of the Royals moving to Nashville or going somewhere else. I want them to still be the Royals. Whether they play in KCK or KCMO, I don't really care. Now, I will say, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers, Jackson County's not the best place to live on the planet. Why would you piss off the 2 professional sports teams that play in your city? That doesn't make sense to me, and they should have probably kept their mouths shut, because who knows? Maybe the Royals don't play in Jackson County anymore. And that is a big loss to their city and their county. I guess just their county. But I think for that reason, it was stupid. But I understand voting no from a perspective of they didn't tell us anything. So why would I vote on something that they didn't tell me what they were going to do?
I think one of the biggest holes in what Casey Tennis was arguing too, with like the whole tax thing and the money instead going towards businesses and all this stuff, is, do they know that if the Chiefs and the Royals leave the area, ultimately their taxes are probably going to get raised anyway? The Chiefs and the Royals were offering them the opportunity to extend a tax where, the plan was kind of flimsy, but that 3/8 sales tax would have been consistent for, the next 20, 30 years, whatever it was. And so I feel like they really missed an opportunity here to maintain that relationship, because now those owners are pissed off. I hope they stay in Kansas City. I hope they stay where they're at in that area, but I don't know anymore. They now open the door for them leaving. And I know Josh Briscoe for KCSN on the Only Weird Games podcast had a really good take on how all this from people who want the Chiefs to go to Kansas. They're all like, ha ha, Jackson County, you screwed up. I can't believe you guys did this. I can't believe you fumbled the ball. He said, I have to push back on that a little bit, because I don't think you can blame Jackson County people all the way, because these 2 plans from the Chiefs and Royals were god awful. Okay, the Royals one was really bad because they were changing renderings up until like a few days before the vote and all this stuff. And then the Chiefs were like, yeah, we're going to give you an activation zone, a VIP entrance, and some new suites. And it's like, the casual Chiefs fan doesn't care about that. That only accommodates the rich fans. And also, one of the questions I had about the Chiefs proposal that we never got answers on is, hey, Clark Hunt, what are you going to do about the F- grades for the facilities for our players, the players that deserve better facilities, the back-to-back Super Bowl champions? What are you going to do about that? I'll gladly give you my money if it means we can give better facilities to the back-to-back Super Bowl champions, because I just wrote a whole article on Clark Hunt and his frugalness on Arrowhead Addict. It was a really good piece. I'll link it down below because I really want you guys to read it, because I go really in depth on Clark Hunt's spending and a bunch of areas of the team, including the facilities. You saw that article from The Athletic where they did some digging on those. Patrick Mahomes was screaming at team president Mark Donovan to get air conditioning in the practice facility. They interviewed Willie Gay, who was now with the New Orleans Saints, but they interviewed him, and he's like, shit, we are the back-to-back Super Bowl champions. Can we get some new locker rooms? And then there just seems to be a disconnect between owners and players, because the Chiefs claim that they were promised a new locker room. Clark Hunt says they weren't promised a new locker room. And it's like, I don't know who said what, but can we just give them a goddamn new locker room already, because they deserve it? And the other one is old as hell. It's just, those are the kind of questions that I wanted answers to. I don't care about some fan activation zone. I want better facilities for our Kansas City Chiefs, because right now, the only saving grace of the Chiefs' NFLPA grades was the coaching staff. Andy Reid and staff got an A+. Everywhere else, the Chiefs' rankings were in the gutter. And so it's like, when Andy Reid is one day gone, when Patrick Mahomes is one day gone, what is this organization going to look like? What is going to be attracting players to play for the Kansas City Chiefs? I fear it's going to be more of what this organization was before Andy Reid showed up. This organization was not in a good place. You had everything going on off the field, all the Scott Pioli stuff with the airplane flying over the stadium with the banner saying fire Scott Pioli. Clark Hunt was the owner when all that was going on. So I know I kind of went off on a different tangent, and I should bring it back in towards the stadiums and stuff like that. But yeah, you can't really blame the Jackson County voters too much because the plans were kind of half-baked at best.
Well, and there's some other examples of stadiums that got approved, like in Minnesota with Target Field, and I can't remember. There were some other examples of Major League Baseball stadiums that did this same, tax vote. And the first go around, pretty much everybody said no. And so this is something that's probably going to take a couple years to maybe fully get passed. Once we have a better idea of what exactly they want to do and where they want to do it, who knows? Maybe things change. But I also think that, I'm really not somebody that's like, oh, move the Chiefs to the Legends or put the Royals in the Legends. I don't think that's the solution. But to counter that, I mean, let's not act like Jackson County is the best place to put, or not the best place to put a stadium, but like Jackson County, the area as a whole, is not a place that attracts many people outside of those freaking stadiums.
The Chiefs and the Royals are the area. They are Jackson County. That wasn't the argument that I had with someone. Oh, the money can go towards making the area better. And it's like, the Chiefs and the Royals are the area. That is what makes it. That is what brings people to the area. Those other businesses that you talk about, how many people that spend money over there because people come to Chiefs and Royals games, and people from all out of town and all these other places come into the city or come into Jackson County and they spend money. Like, that is a huge part of it that I think that they were trying to, downplay or ignore. I really don't want the Chiefs to move. I love Arrowhead. I want them to continue making improvements to Arrowhead. I know there's kind of theories going around out there that Clark Hunt was low-key hoping that this vote would fail so that he can build his new stadium on the Kansas side and he wouldn't need too much public funding for it. And he could build a stadium with a dome on it and they could host a Super Bowl. But Clark Hunt also seems like a prideful dude who is very prideful of his family, of his dad. Arrowhead Stadium was his dad's dream, and I don't think he wants to leave that. I think he wants to stay in Arrowhead Stadium. He wants to stay in Jackson County. But he can if, the city doesn't offer up more public funding. And look, I get it. People don't want to pay for billionaire stadiums. Trust me, I totally understand that angle of it. But this is just kind of what you have to do if you care about keeping your professional sports teams. And I hope the Chiefs stay, man, because I was arguing with a friend of mine too. They were like, oh, why do you care? Especially being in Rapid City, South Dakota now. Why do you care about Jackson County and if the Chiefs move? And it's like, well, when I come back home, I go back home to St. Louis. St. Louis to Kansas City is about a 4.5-hour drive for me. If the Chiefs move to the Kansas side of Kansas City, that now becomes a longer drive for me. Also, there's a lot of ripple effects from the Chiefs Stadium if they were to move. Like, for example, sports betting. Sports betting, it's been a struggle to get that legalized in Missouri. If Missouri now has 2 less professional sports teams, the incentive to legalize sports betting now becomes a lot less. Also, it's just great for the Missouri economy having the Chiefs and the Royals, in my opinion. So, I don't know, man. I hope the Chiefs stay. I don't care as much about the Royals. But I would still like to see them stay in the area. I don't want them moving to Nashville. That's for sure.
Me either.
I think that's worse for everyone involved.
Because guess what? And this is something that people don't understand with how the Royals have played. And by the way, right now they're 6-4. So
that is true.
We've got some winning baseball hopefully ahead of us. But if the Royals did move to Nashville, I have watched the Royals since I was a child. I'm not necessarily going to follow them to Nashville. They are not what the Chiefs are. They could potentially, build up to become that one day in the future where they're contending for a World Series year in, year out, but they're not that right now. And so the amount of fans that I think would make the transition from Kansas City to Nashville would not be that many. And then your fan base is gone. And look what's going on in Oakland right now. You think there's going to be a ton of Oakland A's fans that make the transition to Vegas? No, there's not going to be.
Look how many Oakland A's fans are making the trip to Oakland, or that were making the trip to Oakland.
Because the owner pissed the fan base off. And that is really what John Sherman is on the verge of doing if he does move this team. The fans are not going to sign up for, 100-loss seasons if they're in Nashville. That we have other things that can occupy our time. And there's a baseball team in Legends that I worked for a couple years ago, the Monarchs. They're winning year in, year out. And while it's not Major League Baseball, they at least win. So I think that might be something that
it's a fun atmosphere.
Fans chip their Yeah. I mean, listen, they might not be the pros, but guess what? They're not losing 100 games every year. So there might be some incentive to go watch that. God, pisses me off.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens as things go forward because I think that I don't. Well, I'll ask you. Do you think both the Chiefs and the Royals try to get back on the ballot in Jackson County? Do you think they're willing to negotiate at all anymore with Jackson County? I've seen some people argue that if this was just the Chiefs doing this on their own and not tied to the Royals, that it may have passed. What do you think?
Maybe. I think that the Chiefs hold more, hold more weight
Definitely
because
more goodwill.
they've won 2 Super Bowls, back to back, and they've won 3 in the last 5 seasons. So I think if the Chiefs would have passed this, it still would have had a better chance of going through just because they're the Chiefs. But I don't like how Clark Hunt was going at it from an angle of we want the money so we can add on for my, rich kids club kind of thing. Like this is just that rubbed me the wrong way, but it still would have a better chance of passing because the Chiefs are the Chiefs. And let's be honest, I don't know how many people would have really read too much into the bill if it was just the Chiefs, because the Royals are trying to get a new stadium. And the one thing, listen, Kansas City does have a very strong love for baseball. In fact, I think that the Chiefs, in part why they are so popular right now is because a few years before they started winning again, the Royals kicked it off by winning in 14 and 15. And it really brought the sports atmosphere back to Kansas City, at least the winning culture. And for that reason, I think it carried over to what the Chiefs have done. But right now, there still is a lot of anger and frustration with the Royals and what they've done. And listen, they went out for the first time in a decade, really their franchise's history, and spent on guys like Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. They had a great offseason, and I think it really was, because they did want this new stadium and they wanted to show voters that, okay, we're going to try to win. And they actually went out and they got some guys that have been performing really well. But that's going to have to happen consistently to win this fan base back. And so I think that, if the Royals were a better team, or at least, showed that they put effort into winning, which they did this offseason, I will give them a lot of credit for that. But the previous 7 or 8 off seasons since they've won the World Series, they've put little to no effort into winning. I mean, they drafted Bobby Witt Jr. and they re-signed Salvador Perez. That's about it. And so finally, they've put some effort into winning, and hopefully that turns into more in the future. And so maybe the Royals will start to gain more of that public sentiment back. But at the time of the vote in 2024, the Royals don't have that public favor that they did 5 to 10 years ago. And for good reason, they haven't done shit. So hopefully that starts to come back now. But they can't expect for everybody to vote for their downtown stadium, where a lot of people still believe that Kauffman Stadium, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a beautiful ballpark. And the Royals haven't done enough in order to move. But, I kind of think that my perspective on it, listen, if they could stay at Kauffman Stadium, I would like that. But that's really not the option. It's either go downtown or go somewhere else. They don't want to be in that stadium anymore. And I don't think that's not
the Chiefs want them there either, too. That's the other thing. No. I don't think the Chiefs want them in there either, because they want to turn that into their kind of space to do whatever they want.
Well, and that was the thing, Josh. I heard that they were going to build like a KCP&L down there where the Royals are. That rendering just looked like it was more parking lots. Like what are we giving this money to?
I want to say it was this might have also been Josh Briscoe, but he pointed out how like the renderings of the before was like everything was empty, and then it's like in the new renderings to make everything look nice, they added trees and they added cars in the parking lot to make it look more vibrant. And it's like one of those TV infomercials you would see where it's like they'd have like the black and white clip, like for some organization thing for your cabinets in the kitchen. It's like, oh, here's some lady opening, and then like everything falls down on her. So now you have to buy these new kitchen cabinet organizers, or else this is what your house is going to look like. And it's like the Chiefs are just making Arrowhead look like crap on purpose so that the after and their before and after renderings make it look like fans should spend their money so that the Chiefs can put all this stuff in. It's like, okay, what are we spending our money on actually though? Like, what is going on here? I see cars in the parking lot and I see trees.
again, it's like the promises that we got promised, they went back on those because they didn't give a clear vision. They changed the renderings multiple times, and fans are like, we're not going to vote for something that you're not going to tell us on what we're voting for. And for that reason, I understand why people voted no. I think the people that voted no from the perspective of we don't want those businesses getting moved and we don't think that it's great for the county, that's stupid. That is a really bad handle on economics and what a sports team, a professional sports team, provides to the economy. That's stupid. Yeah. But for the reason that they didn't give a proper, reason for why you should vote, that I understand. But for the people that are like, we just didn't want to see those businesses get taken down, that's stupid, because the Royals are worth those 20 businesses and probably 20 or 30 more, because they bring more money to the county, the state, and even the Midwest. Let's be honest, like a pro sports team is a big deal, and to piss that away is not the smartest decision.
No, because there's a lot of cities, every city that doesn't have a pro sports team wants one, and they will do what they can. If Jackson County, Kansas City won't. So, we've already seen the Dallas mayor, I don't know how serious he was when he said that, but it's like he's talking about, Clark Hunt, come on back to Dallas, come on back, Kansas City, or the Chiefs, I should say. And I will say too, I found that kind of funny because I feel like there's no way in hell that Jerry Jones would allow another team to enter his market. But there are cities out there that would be vying for an NFL or an MLB team if Jackson County doesn't want them.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. Like the whole build it, they will come thing. Like that's what Vegas did, and the A's are going there. I mean, all it takes is one place to be like, you know what? We want baseball, professional baseball in our town. We'll give you a stadium. We'll get taxpayer dollars. That's why when the stadium bill didn't pass, you heard the Kansas governor saying, well, we got like $1 billion that we can just touch right now.
That's what they're doing right now. Like, yeah. I don't know if they will move to Kansas. Like, a lot of people are acting as if it's a done deal. It's not, but there are definitely people on the Kansas side trying right now, doing everything they can and trying to negotiate with Clark Hunt and say, hey, why don't you just come on over to this side of the Kansas City line? I mean, why not? We got you. We wouldn't have. Sorry, I can't talk. We wouldn't have to do a public vote. We'll just give you the money.
We wouldn't have to do a public vote. We can give you a new stadium with a roof. You can host the Super Bowl. We got plenty of parking. We got the amenities out here. We don't got a Denny's that burned down a couple years ago. We have the infrastructure to provide you what you want. And listen, I mean, I think the Legends area isn't the. I mean, it's getting built up, but it's not like, ooh, they're moving to the Legends. You know what I mean? But I think it's probably a better area than Jackson County. I mean, it might not have the, the aura of having two professional sports teams play there for 50 years. But guess what? I mean, it's a nicer area that they've actually built around. Sporting KC plays out there. There's a NASCAR track. The Monarchs play out there. Like, they have things out there. And guess what? The Chiefs go out there, hotels, sports books would get built. I mean, Josh, they would make sure to get their money's worth. And, it is the gamble that the Jackson County residents have thrown up there for the Kansas governor to come and scoop the Chiefs up.
The ball has been fumbled and it's on the ground right now. That's the best way to put it. We don't know who's going to pick it up, but it definitely could be the other side of Kansas City, because they have the money. I think they have the urge and the will to be able to put that money forth to attract the Kansas City Chiefs. And you mentioned like the sports books and everything like that. That's a big part of it. And I kind of mentioned it earlier with Missouri because they've struggled to legalize sports betting. They're like really stubborn about it, but you know how much Clark Hunt probably wants to put like sports betting stations inside his stadium? He could do that with the new Kansas stadium, have like areas in the stadium dedicated to people placing bets inside the stadium. They can't do that currently because it's not legal in Missouri. So Missouri's already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. Tell you what, I mean, a lot of really, really important decisions get made because somebody fumbles and somebody drops the ball. And hopefully Jackson County didn't ruin it for the entire state of Missouri. I mean, listen, I'm a Kansas guy. I live in Kansas. I'm not like, oh, we need him in Kansas kind of thing. They're still the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, whether they're in Kansas or Missouri, it doesn't really matter. If the Royals move to Nashville, they're not the Kansas City Royals. They're not the Kansas Royals. Like we've seen, the 49ers, the San Francisco 49ers, they don't play in San Francisco. So it doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things, but you can't have your sports team moving states away and relocating and leaving you with nothing for the at least area. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that's a good place to stop it, though. We'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. This was an absolutely jam-packed episode, man. We covered just about everything, and I'm sure as soon as we conclude, there will be about 50 more things that happen that we'll have to talk about, because we didn't even talk about the draft at all, and the draft is 3 weeks away. We'll definitely have to get back together, though, and maybe do a mock draft or something. I think that would be fun, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up there, guys. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. You can also check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those audio platforms. But before we officially go, Michael, where can the people find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at KC Sports Report and on the Bleacher Report mobile app at Michael_D'Arcy. I think I've got a live stream on there tomorrow. And Instagram and Twitter at the Michael D'Arcy. And that's where you can find me.
There you guys have it. And that will all be linked down below in the description. As always, as for me, again, like, share, and subscribe. Turn on that notification bell for the Kingdom Crew podcast, especially. You can check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. But with all that being said, we will see you in the next one. Go Chiefs.